I woke up to the sound of my alarm clock and immediately got out of bed and went to the bathroom. I never allowed myself to linger. My years as a policeman had got me used to it. I quickly washed my face, brushed my teeth, put on my uniform, and left the house. I never ate breakfast. At most, I grabbed a coffee and a sweet from the 24-hour supermarket around the corner. I hurried along the quiet street. I didn't particularly like the city I was in because of my job. To be honest, I had grown tired of cities a long time ago. In my mind, they all merged into a single gray mass of identical buildings, skyscrapers, and stores. In the last 15 years, I've moved around a dozen cities, and not one has left a mark on my heart. My life remained the same everywhere. Monotonous work with documents and files, interrogating criminals whose faces I forgot as soon as they left the police station. I had no friends, only acquaintances, some of whom I couldn't even remember by name. Sometimes in the evenings I would visit the same bar not far from home, where a decent retro band was playing songs from my youth. They distracted me momentarily, helping me to forget the hardships of my hard existence. There, in the bar, I remembered my childhood home, my father and mother, childhood friends, the school I loved to go to. Where did it all end up? Why had the colors of life faded so much? Was I condemned to eternal loneliness? Asking myself these questions, I invariably remembered Mercedes, the only woman I ever loved. Then bitterness would spread through my weary heart. Yes, I loved her and lost her. I was to blame for everything. I asked for the bill, left generous tips, and went home, carrying memories and regrets with me. That morning was gray and foggy. I hurried through the streets of yet another unknown city, feeling that my soul would never warm up again. At the supermarket, I slowed down momentarily. I didn't want to eat, but the warm lights invited me in. I approached the sliding doors, which opened and entered, habitually heading down the aisles in search of my favorite sweets. Near the display of chocolate bars, I saw a young man of about 19. Something about his demeanor seemed familiar. For a moment, he looked at me strangely, and then immediately turned around, pretending to examine the products. Something was wrong. My years of experience told me that the young man was acting very suspiciously. As if reading my thoughts, the young man suddenly shot up and ran towards the exit. My police instinct urged me to follow him. I saw the young man skirting the cashiers and almost running towards the glass doors. I ran after him. "Hey, kid! Stop right there!" I shouted, quickly noticing that the cashiers were looking at me with surprised eyes. Maybe they think I'm crazy, but I'm 100% sure that kid is up to no good, I thought. Reaching the boy at the exit, I grabbed him rudely by the sleeve of his jacket. "Stop right there," I exclaimed. "I'll let you go after a search." The young man paled. I noticed that the color of his eyes strangely resembled mine, a rare shade of hazel green. I didn't take anything," he stammered, unconvinced. "If you didn't take anything, then prove it." "Empty your pockets," I replied sternly. I couldn't stand being blatantly lied to. Years of service had armored my heart, making it impervious to sympathy. The boy allowed himself to be searched. In one pocket there was nothing but a hole, but in another there was a stolen chocolate bar and a small black wallet. "So you said you didn't take anything, huh?" I smiled bitterly. How many of these juvenile thieves had I seen in my life, and they all seemed so innocent at first glance. I didn't trust anyone anymore. The boy lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry, I'll pay. Just please don't take me to the police station." "My mother is very ill," he said, unconvincingly. I shook my head. "Why didn't you think of that before you went out with a stolen chocolate bar in your pocket? Why the silence?" The boy lowered his head even more. I honestly don't have any money and I'm really hungry. I do work, but it all goes towards my mother's medication." I looked at the boy skeptically. He really did look very thin, almost malnourished. Maybe this time he was telling the truth, but that didn't excuse him. "And do you often steal chocolate bars?" I asked. The guilty boy nodded and lowered his head. "Every day." My face became as impassive as a mask. "You'll have to come with me to the police station." The boy looked at me with tear-filled eyes. No, please, my mother won't survive this. I told you. I've said it all, I replied firmly. You'll have to answer for your actions. The boy pointed to the wallet I was still holding in my hand. Please give it back. There's no money in it anyway, he begged. But I put the wallet in the pocket of my uniform. I'll check its contents at the police station. With those words, I led the boy out of the supermarket. The police station was only a few blocks away. I walked quickly down the sidewalk, never taking my eyes off the boy who could barely keep up with me. It seemed that he really didn't eat enough, I thought. At the police station, I immediately took the thief to my office. So your mom's sick, you work, and you don't have any money to eat, I said, taking the black wallet out of my pocket. The boy just nodded silently. Let's see what's in here. With those words, I opened the wallet and looked inside. A few small coins, a shiny stone, and a folded piece of yellowed paper. That's all there was. Looks like the boy wasn't lying, I thought, but my usual suspicion kept nagging at me. I put the wallet on the table, took out the piece of paper, and was about to unfold it when suddenly the young man jumped as if he had been stung. Oh no, please, not that. It's very important to me. It's a reminder of... He mumbled hesitantly, but I gave him a stern look, unfolded the paper, and my heart leapt. My hands betrayed a slight tremor. This simply couldn't be. I was holding in my hands a note that I myself had written many, many years ago. At the time, I was still very young, a recent graduate of the police academy. I was assigned to a neighboring town, which made me very excited. Every weekend, I could take a bus home. The town I ended up in was a resort town, nestled in a cozy little bay. During the season, it was packed with tourists and there was no shortage of work, but young Alejandro was ready for the challenges. I had dreamed of becoming a policeman since childhood. Going out to patrol the streets at night for the first time, I felt like an invincible hero. However, to my chagrin, I didn't encounter any troublemakers in the early hours. Walking along the waterfront, I noticed a group of young people. Despite the heat, they were wearing leather jackets and ripped jeans. The guys were talking loudly, each holding a cocktail bottle in his hand. Drinking alcohol on the waterfront is forbidden, I said loudly, approaching them. The guys gave me surprised and mocking looks. And who are you? Asked one of them, a tall guy with red hair in his 20s. Sergeant Alejandro Alvarez. I haven't seen you around here before, I replied. The thin guy replied insolently, while the others laughed. I paid for the laugh, insisting on my point. Are you going to arrest us, General? Someone with a high-pitched voice asked sarcastically. Just then I noticed a girl among them. She too was dressed in torn jeans and a worn leather jacket. Her hair was dyed a bright pink, and she had a nose ring. She was smoking a cigarette, holding it delicately between her slender fingers. The wrist peeking out from the wide sleeve of her jacket was equally delicate and very beautiful. The girl herself gave the impression of fragility. I suddenly felt the urge to protect her. Noticing my gaze, the girl got up from the bench. Why are you looking at me like that? Do I look like a criminal? She asked harshly, although her voice was very gentle. No, but I'm obliged to check your documents, miss. And she doesn't have them with her, the red-haired guy answered for the girl and burst into a loud laugh. The others, of course, joined in. Why wouldn't I have them? The girl's melodious voice cut through the laughter. I have them. She approached me and pulled her driver's license out of her pocket. Mercedes Castro, I read out loud, taking a quick look at the photo. The girl had normal, tidy, dark brown hair. Yes, that's me, Mercedes replied defiantly. I looked into her eyes and smiled, handing the document back. You have a noble surname, but you behave like a commoner, I commented casually. Oh, listen to him talk. The red-haired guy's voice cut through the air. He clearly didn't like how I was talking about his girlfriend, but I didn't pay any attention to his laughter. And you're not my father to tell me how to behave, Mercedes retorted, flicking her cigarette away. She raised her head proudly and walked away from me. Come on, guys, there's a lot of morality here. With those words, she picked up her backpack and without waiting for anyone, headed for the waterfront. The others followed reluctantly. The red-haired guy gave me a dark look, but didn't say anything. I gritted my teeth, but my attention soon returned to the girl. I watched her figure walk away for a long time. Our next encounter was on the road. I was crossing the road at the crosswalk when suddenly a red motorcycle came speeding around the corner. It barely managed to brake in front of me. I raised my eyebrows, waiting for an explanation. The driver took off his helmet, and I let out a surprised sigh. In front of me was Mercedes Castro. Her long-sleeved leather jumpsuit molded her slender figure, and this time her hair was dyed a poisonous green. Mercedes' eyes looked bold and provocative. "Oh, general acquaintance, why are you moving like a turtle?" She laughed. I choked at her unexpected audacity and couldn't find an immediate answer. Meanwhile, Mercedes put her helmet back on and revved up the engine. The next time I met her was in the supermarket. I didn't recognize her immediately. Mercedes was at the fruit stand picking out the most beautiful apples. She was wearing a light blue cardigan and a white floral dress. This time, her hair was dyed turquoise. I wanted to walk past her, but my legs took me to the girl. "Mercedes Castro, an unexpected meeting," I said ironically. The girl, surprised, shuddered and dropped an apple. It rolled across the floor. I bent down and picked it up. "Were you following me?" Mercedes asked, quickly regaining her composure. "No, I just happened to come here for a coffee." Mercedes looked at me, tilting her head slightly. "And you seem to be an apple enthusiast?" I smiled. Mercedes looked at the basket, which already contained several apples, and unexpectedly started to cry. "It's not for me," she managed to say through her tears. I felt ashamed and blushed. I had accidentally upset the girl. "And who is it for?" I asked cautiously. The girl wiped her tears away with the back of her hand. "For my grandmother. She's ill and in hospital. I'm going to visit her." I felt even more ashamed. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "It's all right," Mercedes replied, taking a small mirror out of her handbag. She looked at it anxiously. "You look great," I said sincerely, and immediately bit my tongue because Mercedes gave me a sly look. "Are you paying me compliments already?" she asked flirtatiously. I blushed again just a few minutes into the conversation. "Just stating a fact," I replied casually. Mercedes nodded, clearly not believing me. "Would you like me to accompany you to the hospital?" I asked unexpectedly. The girl looked surprised, but the invitation clearly pleased her. "Are you afraid I'll be kidnapped on the way?" She smiled. "That too," I replied seriously. We paid for the apples and left the supermarket. The early evening was warm, with a soft floral scent in the air, mixed with the salty sea breeze, making inhaling this cocktail more than pleasant. The hospital was only a few blocks away from the supermarket, and I suddenly found myself wishing that the journey there would never end. I couldn't remember what we talked about, but Mercedes laughed a lot, although her eyes were still sad. We stopped at the hospital entrance, and the girl thanked me. "Can I take your phone number?" I asked, afraid that she would refuse. Mercedes just nodded. On the way back, I unconsciously felt wings on my back. I called her the next day and asked about her grandmother's health. "She's a bit better," she replied. "I visited her today." "Do you love her very much?" I asked. "Yes," she confessed. "She's my soulmate, the one person who understands me like no one else." I suggested we meet and walk along the seafront, and she agreed. We walked along the seafront for a long time, sat on a wooden pier and threw stones into the water. Then it got completely dark and the stars lit up the sky. I knew a bit about constellations. As a child, my grandfather used to tell me stories about the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, about Orion and Cassiopeia, about the hair of Berenice and Andromeda. I told some of them to Mercedes, who listened attentively and tried to find these constellations in the sky. "You know so much. It's very interesting to be with you," she admitted. "Are we meeting up at the weekend?" "Sorry, but I'm going home for the weekend." Mercedes nodded understandingly. I thought for a moment, and an idea came to mind. However, mustering up the courage to say it out loud was quite difficult. "But if you want, I can take you with me." I finally exhaled. Mercedes looked at me in surprise. "Do you want to introduce me to your parents?" "Why not? They're really fun people and you'll get to see my house," I said, my heart pounding. Mercedes thought silently about the offer for a few moments. "All right," she said. "Just tell me, what's your parents' favorite color?" "Why do you ask?" I asked. "I'm going to dye my hair that color." She laughed. I smiled back. I was feeling surprisingly well. The trip couldn't have been better. Mercedes appeared at the bus stop in a simple blue dress with little polka dots. Her hair was a natural shade of dark red, and there were no more nose piercings. I realized it was just an imitation. We sat side by side in the front seat, and part of the way Mercedes dozed on my shoulder. When we arrived, my parents met us at the station. I introduced them to Mercedes, and from the happy expressions on their faces, I could tell that they really liked her. Everything was perfect. Delicious home-cooked food, relaxing in the shady garden, a stroll through the nearby fields. We lay side by side for a long time, inhaling the honey smell of the flowers. Mercedes made wreaths for us, and we looked like two children, so carefree and happy we were. Overcome by emotions, at some point, I felt like poetry was pouring out of me. Pulled out a scrap of paper from my bag and an unknown pencil stub from somewhere, and wrote them down, then discreetly tucked the note into the pocket of Mercedes's sleeping dress. 20-some years had passed since then, and right now, standing in front of the young thief in my office, I held that very scrap of paper in my hands. "Please give it back," begged the boy with tears in his eyes. "This note belongs to my mother." I looked at the boy with glazed eyes. "Your mother?" I repeated. "Yes," he confirmed. "So are you going to give me the note back or not?" I took a deep breath and carefully rolled up the piece of paper, putting it back in my wallet. I handed it to the boy, who promptly put it in his pocket. I thought for a moment. "What's your mother's name?" I asked hesitantly. "Mercedes," he replied. "Mercedes," I repeated softly. There was a long silence. The boy looked at me, confused, as if the sudden change in me had surprised him. There was no longer any trace of my previous confidence and assertiveness. "You said she was ill," I whispered. The boy nodded. "She's been in hospital for several months," he murmured quietly, avoiding eye contact. I felt my legs go weak. I pulled up a chair and sat down. "How long have you lived in this city?" I asked. "Since I was born, if I'm not mistaken," he replied. I sighed heavily, then stood up and began to walk around the room as if pondering something. "Listen, what's your name at least?" I asked. "Al," he replied. "It's short, but my full name is Alejandro." I looked shocked at the boy. That's why he looked so familiar, the same eyes, the same hair. Al was simply a copy of me in my youth. My head spun. What I realized simply didn't make sense. How could this be possible? Could this young thief be my son? Memories took me back 20 years. When we returned from my hometown with Mercedes, I took up my post that same evening. The city streets were relatively quiet. A few noisy young people were trying to prove something to each other, and that was all. But when I got to the waterfront, in the same place where I first saw Mercedes, I noticed her old company. The guys were again drinking cocktails and talking loudly. The tall guy with the red hair spotted me from afar. "Ah, our dear Alvarez has arrived," he shouted. The whole group gathered around and approached the leader. I sensed trouble, but I didn't show it. They wouldn't attack a policeman, I thought. I approached them and, as before, reminded them that drinking alcohol on the waterfront was forbidden. "So what are you going to do if we carry on, hero?" the redhead asked insolently. The others surrounded me in a tight circle. "I'll have to take you to the police station," I said calmly. The redhead rolled up the sleeves of his black sweatshirt, revealing a tattoo of a sword and a snake. "Feeling brave, huh?" he sneered. I kept my gaze steady. "I wouldn't advise attacking a policeman," I warned calmly. "The consequences won't be pleasant." The redhead spat at my feet. "And I wouldn't advise you to ride with Mercedes," he replied rudely. "She's not for you. We won't let you off lightly. Consider yourself warned." With those words, the tall guy gave me a dark look and walked away. The rest followed him like loyal subjects. I watched them for a while, What bastards. I had to warn Mercedes to be more careful. I patrolled the streets all night, and when I returned to the police station, unexpected news awaited me. I was being transferred to another city. The news shocked me. I didn't want to go so far from home and leave my beloved, but orders were orders. I pulled myself together and called Mercedes to tell her everything. When she heard the sad news, she started to cry. We met half an hour later at her house. When she saw me, she cried even more. I hugged her tightly, stroking her hair, trying to console her, but she was inconsolable. Maybe it's for the best. I tried to convince myself, remembering the threats from Mercedes' old friends. What do you mean? She asked, wiping away her tears. I told her about the conversation on the waterfront. Don't mind them, she sneered. I've known them since childhood. Dogs bark, but they don't bite. I sighed. I just want you to be happy. I don't know if being with me will be good for you. A life of constant travel. Mercedes looked into my eyes. I'm ready, she said seriously. I was momentarily stunned. What? I'm ready to go with you to the end of the world, she repeated seriously. I looked at her, surprised. What about your family, your grandmother? I visit her often. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That means we should get married, she said. My family is very traditional, and that's how I was brought up. Mercedes smiled. Then I'll be your wife if you agree. I nodded, hardly believing my luck. Yes, I agree, Mercedes laughed. I took her in my arms and spun her around. The wedding was very modest, with only the closest relatives present. Immediately after the ceremony, we left for our new life. The unknown city welcomed us with sunshine. A good sign, I thought. I was very happy. My beloved wife was by my side. I'd been promised a promotion at work. We'd been given a small but nice apartment. What more could I ask for? At first, everything was wonderful. Mercedes loved living in the new city, tidying up the apartment with care. She started attending young wives meetings at the local club, made new friends, and didn't feel bored or lonely when I was at work. We spent weekends together, sometimes at home, sometimes going out or watching movies. Life seemed wonderful and beautiful. Gradually, however, something changed imperceptibly. I spent more and more time at work. My new position demanded more of me. In addition, a secret criminal group appeared in the city, causing panic and constant disruption to the lives of the citizens. I became nervous, I slept and ate badly. I was always worried. I saw crime everywhere. I was very afraid for Mercedes' life and reacted sharply to any look when we went out together. Eventually, we stopped going out, and I forbade my wife to go out alone. Mercedes, used to total freedom, found it difficult to adapt. She turned pale, and one day I heard her vomiting in the bathroom. However, I was in a hurry for work and didn't ask. In the evening, a real storm broke out. I got home late, spent the whole day on my feet and didn't eat anything. I dreamed of getting home and collapsing on the bed in my clothes. But Mercedes met me at the door. What took you so long? She asked, clearly nervous. Darling, you know I have a lot of work to do. I'm very tired, I replied. Have you thought about me? Have you thought about what it's like for me to stay at home all day waiting for you to come back? I suddenly exploded. You could invite a friend over, I suggested, walking into the bedroom and sitting down on the bed, still dressed. I didn't come here for that, he continued shouting. I came to be with you, but you're never here. She started to cry. I wanted to get up and hug her, to comfort her, but I didn't have the strength. Come here, my love, I called softly. I won't, she answered stubbornly. Suddenly, she exclaimed, I don't want to see you anymore. I regret having met you. These final words from his wife pierced my heart painfully. Angrily, I got out of bed and ran to her. Do you think I like this life? Do you think I dreamed about it? She cried again. You chose this and you've always thought only of yourself. You're selfish, you don't see anything around you, she exclaimed bitterly. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I've made the biggest mistake of my life. Instead of hugging her and comforting her, I unconsciously raised my hand to strike her. Mercedes looked at me with wide eyes, then quickly shook her head, as if fighting a vision. The tears dried up instantly. replaced by fear in her gaze. "You're not going to do this," he said calmly. I collapsed into loud sobs, lowering my hand. I covered my face with my hands and cried, "Forgive me, my love. I don't know what came over me." Mercedes remained silent for a long time, then went to the bathroom and locked herself in. Overcome by sadness and shame, I lay down on the bed and fell asleep. I woke up in the morning and the bed was unmade. Mercedes wasn't there. I struggled to get up and staggered to the bathroom. No one there either. There was a note on the kitchen table. "Forgive me, but you won't see me again," Mercedes had written. I ran to the closet and opened the doors. Her clothes and suitcase were gone. I leaned on the wall and slipped to the floor. Have I lost her? A thought crossed my mind. Realizing this, I suddenly got up and ran out of the house, not caring where I went, until I reached a small old cottage where Mercedes' best friend Laura lived. I knocked on the door with all my might. After a few minutes, Diego, Laura's husband, appeared on the threshold, alarmed. "Alejandro, what's happened? You look terrible." "Mercedes," I gasped. "Is she here?" "Don't try to hide her." Diego just shrugged. Laura, drowsy, appeared behind him. When she saw me, she was worried. "Alejandro, what happened to Mercedes?" she asked quickly. "I don't know," I replied, confused. "She's disappeared. I thought she was here." Tears filled my eyes. We had a fight yesterday. I was very tired and fell asleep. In the morning, she was nowhere to be seen. I couldn't help myself and started crying. She wasn't well, blaming me for locking her up, but I was only worried about her safety. "Wait, Alejandro, why are we out here?" Diego intervened. "Come in and tell us everything calmly," but I shook my head. "No, if she really isn't here, I have to find her. I'm guilty and I'm afraid of losing her." Diego managed to grab me by the sleeve. "Stop it. We're not going to let you go like this. You could do something foolish or, God forbid, get run over. Get in and calm down." I gave in, allowing Laura to take me into the kitchen and sit me down at the table. The young woman rushed to make some herbal tea to help me calm down. Diego entered the room, dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, replacing his casual clothes. "All right, here's the plan," he said energetically. "Drink some tea, it won't hurt. Then we'll take my car and look for Mercedes." I just nodded. Laura put a cup of tea in front of me, and I took a few sips, burning my tongue. "Right, we're ready," I exclaimed, getting up from the table. "Thanks for the tea, Laura." Diego and I left quickly and got into the car. Mercedes had 2 other good friends, so we went to look for her at their house. However, none of them knew anything about the girl. "I haven't seen Mercedes for a long time. She's always at home," said one. The other just shrugged. It was clear that they were both telling the truth. Desperate, I shouted, "Where else could she have gone?" Diego thought for a moment. "You know what, buddy?" I finally said. "Let's go to the train station." We drove there. We approached the ticket counter and, seeing the familiar cashier, old Hugo, who had worked there forever and knew everyone in town, we turned to him with hope. "Mercedes, yes. She bought a ticket early this morning but asked not to tell anyone," he replied calmly and added gently. "So you two had a fight, huh?" I nodded sadly. "Don't worry, you young fool," reassured old Hugo. "They'll reconcile. She'll come back like a little lamb, but I didn't share your confidence. Please, Hugo, tell me where she's gone." "Home, of course," he answered simply. "She missed her family." I immediately bought a ticket and knocked on Mercedes' parents' door the next morning. They opened it and were surprised to see me on the threshold. When I told them the reason for my visit, Mercedes' mother put her hand to her heart. I found out that the girl wasn't at home. I visited all of Mercedes' old friends, even the redhead, but no one had seen my wife. I couldn't find her trail. "Are you going to arrest me?" Al's voice brought me back to reality. I looked at the young man, noticing the resemblance to me again. "Wait, you still have time for jail?" I smiled bitterly. "Can I visit your mother?" The boy looked at me in surprise. "You can, but why?" he asked. I nodded quickly, making up my mind. "Then let's go," I said. Questions later. We went to the hospital together. I approached the reception desk. "Hello, I'm here for Mom," said Al to the administrator. a woman in her 50s with a kind but slightly tired face. "And who's with you?" she exclaimed in surprise. "Your relative. You two look so much alike." Al looked at me. "Well, actually, yes, a relative," I replied firmly. "I'm his father." Al coughed, but the administrator paid no attention. "How wonderful of you to come. Now Al will feel better, and Mercedes will probably be happy too." "I hope so," I said, my heart pounding. We went to the elevators and up to the 3rd floor. "How sick is Mom?" I asked Al, who watched me the whole time but didn't ask any questions. "Yes," she replied. We reached the bedroom and stopped in front of the door. "Are you sure Mom won't get worse when she sees you?" I asked softly. "I hope not. If you hurt her, you'll regret it," he said firmly. I just nodded nervously. Al opened the door and entered first, followed by me, feeling me tremble inside. It felt like my heart was beating so loudly that it could be heard in the room. I recognized Mercedes immediately, despite the years that had passed. She looked very pale and exhausted by her illness. She looked at me and silent tears rolled down her cheeks. "Mom," whispered Al, holding her hand. "Mercedes," I whispered, stopping in the middle of the room, hesitant to approach. "Al, please wait in the hallway for a moment. We need to talk," she said. "Is he really my father?" Al asked. Mercedes nodded. Al left, looking at me with mixed emotions. When the boy closed the door, I ran to Mercedes, fell to my knees beside her bed, and buried my face in her blanket. It seemed to me that she was so fragile and almost transparent. "Forgive me, my love, please forgive me," I whispered hoarsely. It seemed as if none of those 20 years had passed, as if we had argued yesterday. "It's me who should be asking for forgiveness, darling," Mercedes whispered. I was pregnant with Al at the time and I couldn't control my emotions. I realized it later, but it was too late. "But why, my love? I waited for you all this time." I remained alone. Mercedes looked at me in disbelief. "At first, I convinced myself that I should forget about you. I was always so proud, but when Al was born, everything changed. I realized that it wouldn't be fair to keep him hidden from you, so I went back to our town. But you weren't there anymore." "I was transferred," I whispered. "The police gave me your new address and I went to you, with Al in my arms. When I approached the house, I saw you with another woman." Mercedes could barely pronounce the last words, as if it was difficult for her. I was stunned. "I don't know who you're talking about." She had long black hair down to her waist and tanned skin, a beauty. You looked so happy together. "Oh, that one." I paused. She was my neighbor, Anna. Sometimes she asked me to help her hang curtains or fix things. Maybe she was in love with me, but I couldn't think of anyone but you. I gently took Mercedes's hand. "I looked for you, I swear. I looked for a long time, but you disappeared as if you had never existed. Sometimes I thought I'd gone mad and invented you." Mercedes cried again. "What a fool I was. Don't blame yourself. It's over now. Now I'll always be by your side, I promise." "I don't know how much time I have left," she murmured. "Is it so serious? Al hasn't told me the reasons for his illness. What do the doctors say?" Mercedes wiped her tears and looked at me. "They say that the course of the disease depends on my will to live. I didn't have it. My life became a series of dull, empty days." I pressed Mercedes' hand against my cheek. Her words touched a tender spot in my heart. "I'll be by your side. Maybe that will bring a little sparkle to your life." "Thank you, my love." Al entered the room. "May I?" Mercedes nodded. He sat in a chair opposite the bed, waiting for explanations. I got up, kissed Mercedes' hand, and approached my son. "You said my father had died," Al said softly, but there was reproach in his words. "Yes, son," replied Mercedes. "The point is that your father and I had a disagreement on one point." I smiled bitterly when I heard the word disagreement. "And we were separated for many years," she finished. Al looked at me suspiciously. "Did he leave us?" he asked. "No, son. He didn't even know you existed." Al looked incredulously at his mother. "Well, actually, he confessed. It was all my fault. Both of us, I intervened. But now everything will be different. Still, Al frowned. But this morning you practically dragged me to the police station. What? Mercedes exclaimed. I didn't even ask how you met. I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand again. Calm down, Mercedes. Al's not in any danger. It was a mistake. Al crossed his arms with a proud look on his face. Like mother, like son, I thought with satisfaction. All right, we'll make friends. I got Al a job with an acquaintance and visited my beloved in hospital every day. With each visit, Mercedes improved visibly. A blush appeared on her cheeks and she began to stroll around the cozy courtyard. The nurses and doctors were happy with the improvements in the patient's condition. She is radiant with joy. Once I went to my beloved with the official car and, with the doctor's permission, took her for a walk. We left the city. The weather was wonderful. I parked on the edge of a large field where yellow flowers were blooming, perfuming the air with a pleasant smell of honey. Mercedes took a deep breath and laughed. It's like when we visited your parents for the first time. Even the sandwiches are the same, but this time they weren't made by my mother, but by me. It felt like we'd magically gone back 20 years. We walked through the countryside, and when Mercedes got tired, I laid out a blanket on the grass. We ate sandwiches and drank coffee from a thermometer, then lay side by side for a while. I'm so happy, Mercedes whispered. So am I. You know, she smiled, it feels like the thirst for life has come back to me. That means everything will be all right soon, I murmured, kissing my beloved.